Good day, everybody. This is Marcel, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer Show. We're doing our broadcast live from Atlanta, Georgia on August 17th, 2020. Hope all is well with you out in the world today. On today's broadcast, we're going to preview the upcoming NBA playoffs in the Backdoor Cut. We'll also delve into the continuing influx and constant changes in college athletics, particularly for the fall season. In the technical state of Georgia athletics, we have audio from the head coaches of Georgia Tech and Georgia State, and Geoff Collins and Shawn Elliott, respectively. We'll also go into the miscellaneous department of our show, and let me pull up my notes here. Let's see. We're going to discuss we've got the playoffs. The miscellaneous department, pretty straightforward. We're going to discuss the NHL playoffs that have started up, the first week of action there. We'll also go into Atlanta United as they continue to prepare for resumption of their regular season schedule. We were able to catch up with new signee Erick Torres and have some thoughts from him on it. And I may delve into what I'm watching as far as the world of television. There's been a lot of Netflix and a lot of TV going on the past few weeks. I'm sure for a lot of you as well, with everything going on with COVID-19 and quarantines and all that jazz. So we'll delve into all of that stuff as we go throughout the show. But as always, we follow everything that we're doing. Head to the mothership, thesportsinquirer.net. That's where you'll see all of our news and notes in the world of sports. You also head to our Twitter and Instagram social media pages. Just look up Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. You look that up and you will be able to follow everything that we're doing. Also go to our Facebook pages. We have two of them. We have The Sports Inquirer as separate words, and then Sports Inquirer, that's one word. And finally, we've actually been spending a lot of time on this as well, and we'd really appreciate it if you head to these platforms as well for our shows. As always, you can head to YouTube and SoundCloud, but also we've added Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes all within the past week. So make sure you head to each of those platforms and listen to our show. You can like us, subscribe to us, leave a note, anything like that. We would greatly appreciate it if you could do any of those things and follow the show. We try to provide it the best way possible. I like SoundCloud. Some people listen to it directly from our site, which is cool as well. So we get plays on there. But yes, Spotify is good, Google, iTunes, working on a few others as well. And once those are officially done and wrapped up, I'll announce those as well. But make sure you head to any of those platforms to check out all the stuff that we are doing. As far as things going on in here, once again, pretty straightforward. Every show, it seems like it's the same thing. Things are opening up more now, especially in the state of Georgia. Things like gyms and stores and all that stuff are pretty open. Wearing a mask is pretty much mandatory for the most part. I will say this: it's kind of unique. You go to certain places. I went to a supermarket of reputable reputation, good reputation. It's a big chain, and they have everyone should wear a mask. I'm wearing my mask, and I see a guy going in, pretty much smoking a cigarette and walking into the store, no mask, no care, and he got in pretty easily. So at this stage. And I understand it from the people that work at the stores. I've seen this at other places as well. You have people up front, got kind of the enforcers for the mask and everything like that. But you have people who are very strongly opinionated not to wear the mask. And it's almost a point where you want to just let them go through because it does avoid conflict and avoid issues in that regard. But the thing about it's all about liability, and liability will be a big theme throughout, especially when we get to our college football or college sports portion of our show. It's all about liability. So if you're an individual and you don't want to wear your mask and all that other stuff and you get sick, you can't go to these supermarkets or retail stores and things like that and come back to them and say, I got sick here and all this stuff. The stores are trying to do their part, and it's very interesting in that regard. But it does always ties into our sports because now we have high school sports, and I've said this before. Then we'll move on. We'll talk about the NBA playoffs and things starting. The playoffs start literally in a few hours of our recording of this show. But it all trickles down. You see, it goes from professional level to college level to high school level. And I'll talk about the high school a little bit because we'll get to the pros and the college throughout our show. But it's just very interesting that we have all in the state of Georgia. It's pretty much every county for itself. We're in Cobb County, where we record the show technically, and some schools are doing virtual learning. Some schools are doing the in the classroom traditional way. In neighboring Paulding County, I'm sure you've seen national news. That's literally the county next to us, at least from where I'm at. And the North Paulding High School, you saw the crowded hallway, the kids going from one class to another in high school, led to suspension of the kid, and then the school being closed, and all this other stuff. That's all within about 20 minutes of where we're recording. But I still see all of the high school sports going on. Football hasn't started yet. Football would have been pretty much coming into its first week right now. But I still see volleyball contests, and I still see softball. I was driving around yesterday. Today's Monday. Yes, today is Monday. Or I still Saturday or Sunday. It was over this past weekend, and I drove past we have local, like the ball fields, and there are football players preparing, like the little kids, the Pee Wee leagues, and there was a big gathering for baseball because I drive by it every other day, and all the parents out there and all the kids, no mask on, playing their little league baseball. Because here in Georgia, the weather is very good. You can play baseball pretty much through October to November, even later sometimes, depending on the day. But there was a big tournament going on, and I didn't see any mask on. From the umpires, the players. It was a big gathering, no social distancing. So it's just very odd seeing how at the professional level and the college level we're seeing all of the precautions being made and dealt with. Yet the high school level and even the lower level, as far as like middle schoolers or elementary, not so much of that is done. Now this may be an isolated incident, but I've seen it more than once throughout the past few months. But it's just very odd seeing how all that stuff is laying out while we see all of these professionals and college teams doing all these things and all the preparations and dealing with it, but we're letting the little kids out there playing without pretty much any precautions. So I don't know if what could be done with that, but just very intrigued by what's going on there. But the good news has been there's more live sports to talk about than we've had over the past month and a half. And we're not even going to touch on baseball or some other sports. I'll probably do that on my next show. But baseball has been going on. We've had issues with the teams testing positive, with people on the staffs, like the Marlins and the Cardinals have really gone through it over the past 2 weeks, not being able to play games. With baseball, Major League Baseball is still going on. We've had auto racing, NASCAR, and Formula One, all of that going on. We've had the Champions League going on as well for European soccer, if that's the interest of yours. MLS, we'll touch on MLS coming up towards the end of our show. But a lot of these sports are still going on or are revamping themselves. So that's a good sign. That gives us, we can actually talk about on the field stuff a little bit more than just a lot of meetings and scheduling and all of that jazz. And that starts off with the first portion of our show as far as the layout, the Backdoor Cut, previewing the NBA playoffs. We've wrapped up the play-in rounds, or I don't know what you want to call it, I guess NBA return, I don't know what the term is, as far as all the play-in games and all that stuff, but we are now officially back in action as far as that goes. Very intriguing matchups in the very first round as we pull up the schedule here. As it loads up for me and I set it up, I think the NBA's done a very good job under the circumstances. We've seen the bubble be very successful. We haven't had, I don't think, any positive test over the past few rounds of testing, so that's been very good. The players have been motivated and very good basketball. And we've discussed it on our shows previously, and I'll bring it up again. I think this atmosphere does lend to quality basketball for several reasons. One is a lack of travel. And I know these guys are traveling very well, and they have charter flights and everything like that, and they're not in the middle seat of Delta flying from Los Angeles to California, or having to deal with a cramped, overstuffed plane, Sprint Airlines. I'm gonna pick on Sprint, why not? So as far as that goes, so it's not like they're traveling in a really bad way, but it saves their legs. It makes them feel good. They get to stay in one location, in the same hotel or suite or whatever the setup is. I think that's a very good thing. I think crazily as well, not having to go home and deal with whatever the life situation is, the home life. I think that's a good thing as well. Now, you prefer to be with your friends and family and your loved ones, husband, wives, children, all that. I think that's a good thing. But I think distractions are minimal or less there. And I think for some guys, that's a good thing. They get to focus on basketball and lead a calmer lifestyle being in the bubble. I think the lack of crowds is a good thing as well, where you don't have to some guys play better or worse in crowd conditions. So I think that's been beneficial. Just looking at the setup, it's really like a practice or just a scrimmage, kind of like AAU style of play. That's led to better shooting. That's led to better execution along those lines. Now, I think in the end, you want to go back to the normal circumstances of playing in front of your home crowds. But for all things considered, I don't think it's been a very bad deal at all for what they've had to work with. And I look at the Western Conference, and we'll start there because we did have a play-in game. Portland was able to defeat Memphis in the play-in game this weekend to reach the first round of the playoffs. I look at the Lakers and Portland series. I think the Lakers will win the series ultimately. I don't think they're going to lose this series. I think we're seeing right now people want to make this, are the Lakers in trouble? We want drama in the playoffs in the first round. But I think ultimately, James and Anthony Davis will do enough to get by. The problem that the Lakers are going to have to deal with is their perimeter play with dealing with McCollum and Damian Lillard, who's probably been the MVP of the bubble. We saw him score 61 points against the Mavs. We've seen him play very well at multiple 50-point scoring contests while in the bubble, willing the team into this series. But you look at McCollum as well, and Carmelo Anthony, who we've criticized quite a bit. He's found a solid role, maybe as a third, and with Nurkic, you could say even a fourth option for the Blazers. And Carmelo brings them some inside play as well. He's a very good post-up player. Mid-range game is strong. Portland's going to be a problem for the Lakers because I think James and Davis are going to do their thing. But the problem with the Lakers, and it's not going to rear its ugly head, I think, in this round, but maybe later on, the best LeBron James teams that we've seen over the years in Cleveland, especially in Miami, James would drive and dish, and it was pretty much him handling the ball, doing what he does, and having outstanding shooters on the wings for him. And he does not have that with the Lakers. J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters, very streaky shooters. You have Kuzma and Caldwell Pope. All these guys are streaky. When they're shooting the ball well, and they have not shot it well at all in the bubble, they have one of the lowest offensive efficiencies in points per game since the NBA restart. And the restart, that's what I've been looking for the whole time with the show, saying the NBA restart. But you look at the numbers, they're not very good. And you look at dealing with the lack of shooting, that could be a problem as well. And the Blazers have size. You have Nurkic, you have Whiteside. Did not play well in the Memphis game at all. He's so hit or miss. But if he's an active big, he can give you a double-double, and that could be something that the Lakers will have a problem dealing with. I still think they ultimately will get by and move on, but very tough series. I think Houston and Oklahoma City, I would have said the Rockets, who are going to either shoot their way to a championship or burn out very early in the postseason. Not having Russell Westbrook available for this series, it looks like, or maybe not for the first few games at best, is going to be a major problem for the Rockets. I think that Houston ultimately will get by in this series. They'll find a way to get through. But Oklahoma City, they are a very lively 5 seed. And with Chris Paul and the young guys finding their way through. But I think Houston ultimately will find a way to win this series. Denver and Utah, that's a tricky series to pick as well. Mike Conley, birth of his child, he's out of the bubble. Good for him personally. But if you look at it on the court, him not being available is a major concern. Jamal Murray is going to have a pretty strong advantage at the guard position. Now, I don't know if Conley, I know he has to return and be in quarantine and all that, so it's tough to say how many games he's going to be out. I could say 1 game, maybe out 4 or 5. We don't know. Hopefully he's saw the birth of his child and is healthy, can come back into the bubble and continue to play for the Jazz. But that's a solid loss for for Utah. Now you say Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert are their main guys, no worries. But still, Conley's been a very stabilizing force and a good ball handler to take that responsibility off of Donovan Mitchell. But Denver, you look at their squad, they're intriguing because you have Murray, as I said, you have the Joker, Jokic. He's maybe the best center in the NBA. I would say he is right now. And there's a bunch of interesting guys out there. You have Millsap, we've seen play forever, a solid player. The Bobos and the Michael Porter Juniors, the young guys, kind of off the bench in the rotation. It's the postseason, you don't know what to expect from them, but they've shown really strong flashes over the past few weeks. I'm going to take the Nuggets to win this series overall. And then the last one, and this is a fun series just for star power purposes, you have the Clippers as a 2 seed facing the Dallas Mavs as a 7 seed. You have 4 MVP caliber players playing in this contest. You have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who have played very well. Especially George has found a shooting stroke in a very strong way in the restart on one side. And then you have Luka Doncic, who some would say was the MVP this year, is going to probably finish top 3 or 4 in the balloting. And then Kristaps Porzingis, who has, if Lillard was, I know that you have Warren in Indiana, and you also have, as I said, I thought the Damian Lillard, who's probably been MVP of the NBA restart in the bubble. Porzingis has been right there, averaging close to 30 points and 10 rebounds since the restart, playing more on the interior. Their future is very, very strong. But ultimately, I think you got to look at the Clippers and the depth of their roster. I mentioned Leonard, and I also mentioned Paul George. But you look at Montrezl Harrell, who's going to work his way back. You have Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, Zubac. You have just Morris. So many guys on their squad that can give you major contributions to the team. And we've seen Kawhi Leonard. He's battle-tested, multiple-time NBA champion. I think they are now rounding out into a pretty strong form, peak condition, to be ready to play. And Porzingis and Doncic, I mean, they're so talented. You know they're going to go off and have a big game or two. The Clippers aren't going to sweep at all. It wouldn't surprise me even if the Mavs, their first game is tonight, that they come out and win game 1. And that's going to be, oh, what's happening with the Clippers? What's the concern? But I think ultimately the talent and the depth of the Clippers, and no disrespect to Tim Hardaway Jr., who's been solid for them, and Curry for the Mavericks, but I think in the end, the Clippers will find a way to ultimately win that series. And then you move on to the Eastern Conference. Intriguing series, but I think it's a lot less wide open than the West is. I really only see 2 teams or 3 teams that are championship contender quality for the East. Milwaukee and Orlando, that's the 1-8 first seed versus 8 seed matchup in the Eastern Conference. I don't think you're ever going to see any sweeps, but Orlando comes in, especially with the injury to Jonathan Isaac, hurt his knee. He's out for the season. Orlando doesn't really bring much to the table. They limp their way into the 8th seed. They kind of won it by default. I don't see much competition for them, as far as providing much competition for the Buccaneers, the Bucks. I don't see much of that in regard. I think the Bucks, especially with Giannis, who's going to be the MVP, they'll announce it at some point. I think they roll in that series. Indiana and Miami, this is a strong toss-up series as well. The injury to Warren really stinks and really hurts for them. I don't think he's going to be back for the first round. But I think Miami, with Jimmy Butler and Bam, you got to figure that they have the better team. But I can see Oladipo and Sabonis, those guys, they're playing very well also. And this is interesting as well, there's no home court advantage. I know they're going to try to jazz it up. You get to wear your home uniform and I guess have your home fans on the virtually with that big jumbotron or whatever that contraption is. But there's really no home court. And that's good for the road teams. And that's another reason I think you've seen teams play better as well. In the end, coin flip, I'll take Indiana to win the series, but that one can go anyway. Boston and Philadelphia, no Ben Simmons for the Sixers. I guess in the end he has surgery. I guess he dislocated his kneecap, and that's not very good. That's not good. He's not going to play the rest of the season. Without him, I don't give the Sixers very much of a chance. Embiid, Embiid may be the best player on the court in the series. And no Tobias Harris, he's a solid contributor as well. But outside of that, I don't see much of the Sixers. And this is a time for Boston. We've been hearing about Boston for years now. We've heard about them from this current era. Brad Stevens, best coach in the NBA. We've heard so much about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and those young guys. And they both averaged 20-plus this year, became all-stars. That's fine and dandy. We've heard about Kemba Walker, his big move from Charlotte to Boston this offseason. Gordon Hayward, I know he broke his leg very early in his tenure with the Celtics, but now he's been playing for a while now. I want to see if Boston is that team or that squad that people keep talking about and that the media, I hear, pushed big time. They need to make a run to the finals this year. I know Giannis is strong, and we'll get to the Raptors, who are the defending NBA champs. They're a good team as well. But I'm tired of hearing about they talk about Jason Tatum like he's the second coming of MVP. They talk about him at an MVP level, and Jaylen Brown as the best two-way player in the NBA, and Kemba Walker. And I know he started to restart a little bit injured, but you hear him try to hear him in the conversation among the top point guards in the NBA. And Brad Stevens, you think he's Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich and Red Auerbach thrown together, and he's like this new boy genius head coach. I need to see that all put together in a postseason run for me to actually acknowledge that this Boston team is for real. There are no excuses. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's right. I need to see that from them. They should really beat up on Philadelphia pretty easily. They beat them in the postseason before and last season and otherwise, so it needs to, with the current regimes, it needs to happen again. So that's what I want to see from Boston. It's not necessarily them just beating Philadelphia, it's how they beat them. The Raptors, they open up the series against Brooklyn. They're the second seed out of the East. They're maybe the only team in the entire, as far as championship level contenders, playing with house money. They won a championship last year. They lost Kawhi Leonard free agency to the Clippers. Everyone kind of expected them to fall off the face of the NBA, off the plan of the NBA, and not contend at all. They've done a very good job. We've seen Siakam emerge as a top player. Got credit to Nick Nurse. I know when he was hired last season, it was kind of questionable because they had Dwayne Casey there for such a long time, and I thought that he was doing a very good job. And they got rid of him to bring in Nick Nurse, the assistant. What's he going to do? He led them to a championship last year. He's kept the team in a very strong form throughout all of this year. So credit to the head coach. I think Van Fleet has played very well. You have Kyle Lowry playing at an all-star level. They have a very interesting team. They can contend with the Bucks because they defend very well, and they may actually have better scoring than the Bucks do. And the Bucks are strong. We have Giannis, who says MVP. Middleton is very good. Bledsoe. You have the Lopez brothers, them working inside, outside. So the Bucks have a lot to work with. But I think if you look at the outside of Giannis, it is very tough to just ignore him. If you take the rest of the team, player by player, you may like the Raptors a little bit more than the Bucks if they advance that far into the postseason. And then furthermore, I know I just talked crap about the Celtics for about 2 minutes, but on paper, if you look at that team, and I didn't even mention Enes Kanter, not much in the defensive end, but offensively skilled and a good, solid rebounder. You look at the Celtics, I think the Clippers are the most talented team in all the NBA, but the Celtics could be in the top 3 or 4 conversation as far as the most talent on a roster. In Toronto, I think that if you look at the Bucks, and I'll just end on this, I think the Bucks ultimately will reach the finals because I've said all of this stuff. I think they've played the best as a team. Their point differential is historic. They're excellent defensively. Their shooting can be a little off at times, and that's where they're going to hurt themselves. But they have the ability to go inside with Giannis and others, so that's a good thing. But I think it's the East is the top three teams, the Raptors and the Celtics and the Bucks. Those top three teams are so good. The other five teams, I think, are really going to struggle making a postseason run at all. And then I look at the Western Conference. I can see the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets, even the Rockets making a solid run in the postseason and making it to a final. Even the Mavs. Now, the Mavs drew the short stick getting the Clippers. But if there was some way if they got past the Clippers and found a way to do that, I don't think they will. But when you have two dynamic guys like Doncic and Porzingis, you can make a run to a final. So that's why I think it's very intriguing, all of that going on. So those are my thoughts on the NBA. I'm trying to think of anything else that happened. It's been all straight up to that. We talked about Thibodeau on our last show, him signing with the Knicks. As I've mentioned, you can have the reincarnation of all the top head coaches of all time. It comes down to players, and the Knicks don't have players. Now, how do the Knicks get the players? Whether it's through free agency, we've seen that had not happened for many years for a multitude of reasons, from ownership to otherwise. They've drafted players like a Porzingis, and it's not worked out, and they trade him, and we see what he's doing in Dallas. Until the Knicks get a solid core group of players that can play at a championship level, they're not going to be a champion. So I said the hiring at Thibodeau, he signed a 5-year deal. He's not going to be there beyond 2-3 years. We already know this. Knicks go through, ever since we've done I need to do the math, since we've started Sports Inquirer Show or the podcast or other incarnations, other versions, we'll say versions of this show, I think the Knicks have literally had 5 or 6 head coaches in some form. And if you go back to 15, 20 years ago, and I'm a Knicks supporter. I grew up in New York City. I can go back, and everyone talking about Pat Riley and Jeff Van Gundy. Those are the saddle years. Those are the good years. They've had Don Nelson, Larry Brown, Jeff Hornacek, David Fizdale. You go down the list of all the coaches they've had there. Mike Woodson. And Woodson was the last guy to leave into the playoffs and actually make a little bit of noise in the postseason. Woody can't get a job anywhere else. That's basketball, though, I guess. But you go through all these head coaches and it's all the same reality and the same verdict. You get, I said Hornacek. I think I mentioned Hornacek. But you just go through all these coaches, and in the end, the Knicks are still not in the postseason. It's just, so they could hire Thibodeau and the fans that get excited because, hey, we got Thibodeau. He's led Chicago to the conference finals and all this other stuff. Until they get players, that's not going to mean much. And then I do need to also discuss the Kings have parted ways with Vlade Divac as the general manager. Just not a good tenure in Sacramento for him. Not drafting Luka Doncic and taking Bagley out of Duke. That was a misfire. Harrison Barnes signing a 4-year long-term deal with him. That hasn't worked out. They've done some okay things. DeAndre Fox, he's a solid player. Buddy Hield, he's a contributor. But outside of that, Sacramento, it's kind of the same deal. They go through so many general managers and so many head coaches until you get those star players that Doncic could have been for them or spend their money other ways. It's not going to be much. But we'll see. I guess Joe Dumars is running the search right now, or kind of on an interim basis. That's kind of odd. If you're going to, and Dumars, who's won a championship as a general manager with the Pistons. Now, it didn't end well with him in Detroit, especially the Josh Smith signing. That wasn't good. But if you're going to bring a guy like Joe Dumars into your organization, you just need to not have the interim tag on him. I mean, what's he going to do over this next lottery and next offseason to change your opinions of him? I think they just need to sign him to a long-term deal. Because with Dumars, you do know this. He will bring stability to the organization. As I said, it didn't end well in Detroit, but he still put together a championship team there with Rip Hamilton, Billups, Rasheed Wallace, Tayshaun Prince, all of those guys. So you've seen him evaluate talent and bring and trade for talent, as far as the draft and all that stuff, in a very good way. So they just need to keep him long term, give him a few years. Don't let him burn out in a year or two, and just fire him if the team gets off to a slow start. Because Sacramento's infamous for that as well. So that's the last thing that they need to do as far as that goes. So the NBA, as today, they're back in the bubble, or they're in the bubble, and the playoffs start, as I said, literally within a few hours of this recording. So we'll be keeping track of all of that. Let's move on to college athletics and the technical state of Georgia athletics. Let's see, since our last show, we've had, it's to the point where we just need to announce what conferences are playing sports instead of the ones that aren't playing sports, because it is dwindling down quite a bit. We'll stick with football as far as the Southeast in relation to what we do here. Right now, as recording of the show on August 17th, the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, and the Sun Belt are all still playing college football this fall. That's the announcements that we've had so far. Obviously, the big news was the Big 10 and the Pac-12. They have suspended suspended fall sports, and that also includes volleyball, that includes the cross country, and soccer, men's and women's soccer. And it does also affect the college basketball season. I think and we need clarification on that as well, because we've heard teams or heard the conferences say that they're suspending sports. Now, for the fall. Now, there should be a distinction there. As I mentioned, sports that are considered fall technically are football, volleyball, men's and women's soccer, and cross country. Those are the fall sports. But the fall, if you look at it as well, what about basketball? That's considered a winter sport. But basketball starts as early as November for play. It's a lot of non-conference games and tournaments. But does that include the suspension of basketball season or a postponement of it? So that's why we've seen some conferences as well say we're not playing sports through the calendar year into January. Well, that eliminates pretty much your non-conference basketball schedule. So there's needed to be more clarification with that. But for the sake of our conversation, we're going to discuss those fall sports that I have mentioned. And that includes like the Big South, which affects Kennesaw State football. They are not playing a fall season. And the Atlantic Sun Conference, I got a personal note directly from somebody, because we do work with them, that their fall sports are suspended. So no KSU volleyball or cross country for all of you out there, or women's soccer. What this means in essence is that, and the NCAA has made the decision not to award championships in the fall. So we're not going to see a national champion in all of those fall sports as mentioned. Now, the distinction, though, is that football is in its own world. They're not going to do an FCS championship, which is Division 1 AA for the layman. And so they're not going to do a championship. We know that they usually do a 16-team playoff and go along those lines. FBS football, which is what a lot more of you are familiar with, which is the bowl games, the Sugar Bowl, Rose Bowl, all of that jazz, ACC, SEC. Those games technically can still take place. We've not seen a cancellation of the Rose Bowl, none of the BCS bowls. We've not seen a cancellation of any of the bowl games, from your Holiday Bowl to your, I'm trying to think of a non-BCS game, to your not Citrus Bowl anymore, Capital One Bowl. All those games are still going on. Now, the problem is they need teams to play in those, and a lot of those alignments or connections are with the Pac-12 and the Big 10. Do those bowl games move on to the spring? Do they just not have them this year? We don't know. And it's just confusing. And we've also had the ACC. They've announced their schedule, and we broke it down last week. Georgia Tech, they opened the season in September at Florida State. They're going to play at Syracuse. There's no Georgia game. They travel to Miami. They go to Florida. So they play Florida State and Miami. Florida is the hotbed of this coronavirus. You watch the news; they've had a lot of issues there. Yet they are still going to play games in those. They travel to Syracuse in the state of New York, getting on a flight, flying 3-4 hours. Syracuse is a long way from Atlanta, Georgia. Yet they can't drive down the road of an hour and a half and play Georgia. Very confusing with the schedule. Same thing with the South Carolina and Clemson. Big rivalry in the Palmetto State. They're not going to play each other this year, yet they both are playing ACC and SEC schedules. Florida and Florida State. I've done that drive, Tallahassee to Gainesville. And it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. You're there quickly. Yet these teams are traveling all around the country to play football games. It's very confusing. But that's the state that we're in right now. And I said the SEC is going to announce their schedule later on today, on August 17th. I will just see what's going on. And Justin Fields, the quarterback for Ohio State, he started a big petition that we saw the hashtag "We Want to Play" movement on social media last week. He has a petition. I think got hundreds of thousands of signatures, and I know he did a national spot on ESPN today as we're recording the show. I haven't heard his thoughts yet. Look, it's a good effort from him. It's a good concept, a good thought or philosophy what he's trying to do. It's not going to matter, though. The schedules are set. The NCAA has minimal say in this. They've looked very toothless and powerless with Mark Emmert, their president, through the entire process. The reality is that these conferences are operating on their own. The Big Ten, they've just canceled their fall season, and they're going to try to play in the spring. I don't think that's going to work. They can try to play, and they may even get some games in, but you're not going to see a large amount of high-profile players playing in that, like a Justin Fields. He's going to prepare for the NFL draft. He's not going to play. I know he's saying all the good things he's going to want to play and be part of the. And I think he would want to play. I think that's why he wants to play in the fall, because a lot of these guys don't play in the fall. They're willing to do that. It could be for a national championship, Big Ten championship, all that stuff, and improve their draft stock. They're willing to do that in the fall, finish their season, we'll say January, rest up, prepare for the combine in March, whenever it is, and then the draft is in April or May. They can rest their bodies and be ready for the upcoming NFL season. But if you're going to do this proposal of starting the season second week of 2021 of January and playing all the way through, let's say, February or into March, and then your body's fatigued and beat up, and then you got to turn around and do an NFL training camp, or say you're an underclassman, you're a freshman or sophomore, or even a junior, you come back for your senior year, you're going to play 2 full college seasons in 1 calendar year? That's not a good look. So you talk about safety and everything going on there, and okay, you're not playing in the fall for COVID purposes, but then you can have the guys play up to 20 plus games in a calendar year. That doesn't make sense at all. That's why I think the push is now to find a way to get a fall season in, because this spring season concept isn't going to happen. And we've discussed it before, and I'll say it again. If you worked in the college athletic department or worked for a university, you know spring season is your busiest time of the year. From January to May, or from January really to June, it's a sprint. You have basketball season. You have all the spring sports we've gone over. Baseball, softball, track and field, tennis, lacrosse, wrestling. All those are going on. Swimming and diving. There's some crossover into spring. All of those are going on in the spring period, which I consider February through June. And you're going to throw football, which is the sport that requires the most commitment, time, money, and resources. You're going to throw that on top of your spring season. That's going to be a hard no. I think ultimately, money talks, and TV money talks especially, they'll find a way to get the games in, the football games in, and you still have your spring Olympic sports. But it's going to be very tough for the athletic departments to make it happen. And I'll end on this, and then we'll get to the Georgia football coaches and their thoughts on preparing for the potential season. If you're postponing stuff now and trying to figure it out, what's to say we're doing this in August? Are we going to have any solutions or answers by the spring? We don't know that. We don't know if there's people talk about vaccines and taking shots and maybe social distancing, the virus. Got to give a terminology right. The virus will subside, so maybe vaccines won't be needed. You hear all these theories when you have board certified professionals, doctors, people that dedicate their lives to knowing and studying these type of things. When they don't have clear answers, we don't have clear answers. That's what's interesting. I love all these media people, and I throw. I guess I'm a media member. I throw myself in there. All of a sudden, we're all doctors. We're all experts. Or not. Look, we all want sports to be played. I want it. You want it. We all want it to be played. It hurts business from personal level. It really hurts for people that work in the stadiums and cover sports. I've had so many friends and colleagues or people I've crossed paths with, just in general, laid off, furloughed, had to take pay cuts and all this other stuff. This is real. It's real business. If there are no live games, there's no media. I mean, the media coverage just is not there. And I said there's so many times you can report about quarantines and all that other stuff. If there are no live games, and I said we have more live games, so people are starting to find their way back into work, so that's good. But be very careful with all these media people. Like, let them play. We want to play. It's for selfish purposes a lot, and it's tough to not have selfish purposes because people want to work. But you got to look at it from a big objective view of things. We have, as I said, whether it's Dr. Fauci or your Surgeon General or someone from the CDC, your local doctor that you go to, your pediatrician or whatever, no one has a solid answer on this situation. Now, there are ways to prevent the spread of it, and there are ways for precautions, and then it becomes political, and that's a problem as well. When you have politicians, and they're just as bad as the media members, when they start spreading opinions and thoughts, and we need to return to school, we need to do this and that, it's very politically driven and motivated, and we're in elections year for the presidency, which makes it even worse. So a lot of these people are up for re-election or trying to get into office or move on, or promote themselves. So you can't trust any of these opinions. You can't trust me. I'm saying all this stuff. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert. So the reality is, going back to the sports side of things, what's to say that you're trying to postpone and cancel your sports now in the fall, and it's miraculously going to be better in February or March? We don't know that. We don't have an answer. I think you should try to get your games in as much as you can now. If you need to quarantine, have empty stadiums, all that stuff, that's the best way to do it. Because I don't think you're going to be able to get your games in necessarily in the spring as you're planning to do that. But teams are still trying to prepare and continue to play for this upcoming season, and that includes Georgia Tech. Their football season starts in a month, and Geoff Collins discussed the team training and how preparations are going for the Yellow Jackets for the potential 2020 campaign. Here is Coach Collins discussing that.
The teams that can be innovative, the teams that can be creative, the teams that can think outside of the box are going to be the ones that are successful. And that's what we're trying to do every single day, even when our guys are away from us. Lou Corral, our head strength coach, went viral probably 8 to 10 times with his workouts and the things that he was providing for our players, the motivation that we do to keep our guys engaged. And I just think it goes back to the relationships, the trust, the love that you have for your guys. It really helps in situations that are unique. You know, when you get thrown some curveballs and, you know, you're in a situation that nobody's ever been in before, having that trust factor, the love and the care factor pays dividends so that the guys make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. The coaching staff is doing what they're supposed to do to develop every single day. But yes, I am the creative piece and the thinking outside the box piece. I'm blessed to have a young, innovating coaching staff that really helps me do that and connect with the guys. Biggest thing in the whole philosophy that we've had ever since we left March 12th was to control what we can control, make sure we're putting protocols in place to take care of our guys, to make sure we have the healthiest and safest standards at our facility, the protocols for our players and for our coaching staff and for everybody associated in the organization. That has been the number one priority. We've gone to great lengths to control what we can control in our building, in our organization, with our coaching staff, with our players, and our complete focus is on what we need to do every single day to provide the safest environment and let our guys develop in an environment that follows all the protocols laid down by our medical professionals. Our guys have embraced it. Our coaching staff has done an amazing job educating our guys, making sure they're doing the right things on and off the field. And we've got a lot of guys that got a lot of experience last year and have matured in this program that understand that every decision that we make on and off the field affects everybody else in the organization. And that's never been more true than it is today. And we will continue to do that, keep being updated by our medical professionals, the CDC, the guidelines that are released by the medical professionals in our community and in the ACC and the NCAA. And we will make sure every single day we stress to a safe environment for our guys to continue to develop.
And that was Coach Collins discussing the upcoming potential season for the Yellow Jackets. And we also talked with Shawn Elliott, head coach of the Panthers, and his thoughts on the situation and preparing to train for the season.
Elements and go out there and to run and catch and do a lot of different things, and to be back on the football field participating in football related, fundamental drills. It was really good for us. You can tell that we've been off that field for quite a long time. Not really been able to throw and catch over the summer like we normally do. But we got a ways to go. But I think everybody was thrilled to be out there running and playing the game of football. There's so many guidelines now as us coaches and players and meetings. Everything's different. I'm not going to sit here and paint you a picture and say it's the greatest thing ever. I mean, because it's really not. I've got to wear a shield. I've got a mask on out there practicing. That's difficult for me, but it's something we have to do and something we're going to continue to do. And, we're doing what we can as far as, distancing our players, but, we're practicing the game of football. So that's very, very hard. And, we all understand what we're up against right here. So we're trying to make it the best we can.
And that was Coach Elliott discussing the upcoming season, or preparing for the potential upcoming season for the Panthers. Their season opener against Murray State has been canceled because Murray State is in the Ohio Valley Conference, and they canceled postponed their fall football season. So we'll see what happens there as far as Georgia State's first game of the year. Now let's move on to Miscellaneous Department and just some quick thoughts on there. NHL Playoffs, I've been enjoying watching them quite a bit. Just several thoughts. I'll fly through these series so far and give initial thoughts. We'll start the Eastern Conference. The Flyers and the Canadiens. Philadelphia leads the series 2-1, able to get a win 1-0 on August 16th. I think this series, Carey Price is doing as much as he can as far as defending and goalkeeping for the Canadiens. But Montreal has scored. They scored 5 goals in Game 2. But in their losses, they've scored 1 goal. They lost 2-1 in Game 1 and lost 1-0 yesterday. Montreal is not scoring enough. And Philadelphia, who's the top seed, they had a very strong form in the restart of the NHL season. If Montreal doesn't find more goals, they're not going to win the series. That's the simple part of that. I look at the Tampa and Columbus series. We saw Tampa win 3-2 in 5 overtimes in Game 1. Respect to the Columbus coming back in Game 2 and winning 3-1. I thought that series would be shot for Columbus, but with John Torello, you know that he is a tough head coach. He's going to have them motivated and playing well. But Tampa, they're the better team, and they lead 2-1. Game 4 is this afternoon. So I think Tampa is going to find a way to win this series, but that can definitely go 7. You have Washington and the Islanders. And Washington, once again, the Islanders dominating this series. They lead 3-0, won 2-1 in overtime yesterday. I just don't think I know not having Backstrom is a major loss for the Capitals, but give credit to the Islanders. They have Barry Trotz, their head coach. Obviously, 2 years ago, led the Caps to the Stanley Cup championship as a head coach. He knows what he's doing, and you're just not seeing enough scoring from Oshie and Ovechkin. I know he has scored a few goals in this series, but they're just not getting enough offense. And defensively, they have been lacking very much. And that's where the Islanders, you got to figure they're going to close the series out pretty soon and move on to the next round. And the last series in the Eastern Conference, Boston and the Hurricanes. Boston leads 2-1. They were able to win Saturday night 3-1. I think that you have now Tuukka Rask, starting goalkeeper for the Bruins. He left the bubble. He's left the team for COVID-19 related concerns. So they have the backup in there. That's always tough to deal with. But he left before Game 3, and the Bruins were able to win 3-1. So they've adjusted, at least for one game, pretty well with Tuukka Rask not being, in front of the pipes for the Bruins. So we'll see what happens there. Golden Knights and the Blackhawks. Chicago finally showed up and did his thing. Were able to win Game 4 yesterday, 3-1. But the Golden Knights have dominated, whether it's been Fleury or any other guy at goalkeeper. They've rolled through the Blackhawks. Now, Chicago, they have a lot of pride in that team. When you have 3 future Hall of Famers like Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, Duncan Keith, you're going to have a prideful team. They're not going to go down. Them getting swept was very unlikely. So they're going to show, and then Crawford, Stanley Cup winning goalkeeper. So they were not just going to go down without a fight. But still, being down 3-1 against a team of quality like the Golden Knights, the top seed in the Western Conference, that's going to be very tough for Chicago to overcome. I think Chicago beating Edmonton in their best-of-5 series and getting past Connor McDavid and the Oilers, that was a big accomplishment for the Blackhawks, who are really in rebuild mode after finishing with the 12th best record in the Western Conference. So we'll see what happens there. Colorado, interesting matchup against the Coyotes. I think with McKinnon, you've seen him have a pretty strong series for the Avalanche. Now, the Coyotes did win Game 3 on the 15th, 4-2. But I still think Colorado's the stronger team overall. But Arizona, they got a tough little squad. They're a 7 seed, but they're very feisty. But I think we've seen Colorado show themselves to be the better squad there. And then finally, you have the Stars and the Flames. I must admit, I've been very bad. I've not watched too much of this series. But I know that Dallas won 5-4 in overtime in Game 4. That game was last night. And I'll pull up the recap right now because I want to get his name right. I know that, let's see, it's coming up right now. And while my information loads up, I just say that they've done a very good job with the setup of this series, or the setup for the bubble, if you want to call that, for the NHL. Having the hubs in Toronto and Edmonton were very good ideas. The games have flowed very well. You've had multiple games playing at one time, so there's been a lot of good back and forth action as far as that goes. Yeah, Pavelski for the Stars, he had a hat trick, so that was a very good performance for him for the Stars. That series is 2-2. That's a coin flip series as well. Once again, no home ice advantage. Normally, I would say you go with the Stars. They have the home ice advantage. But Calgary, they're playing in their same province in Alberta, Canada. So there's not much travel for it. It's just all in with one area. So in that one, I'll take the Stars to win that series, but no guarantees there. And let's see what else. Fine, there are 2 more things. We'll talk about Atlanta United. We'll delve a little bit more to Atlanta United as they prepare for their matchup this Saturday, August 22nd against Nashville. But they did announce their signing, or they had the official availability of Erick Cubo Torres, the Mexican forward. He is now in the squad and training and is available for the team. The 27-year-old joins Atlanta United after more than 230 professional appearances at the club level and 65 goals throughout his career. He has spent the last 2 years in Liga MX with Club Tijuana, and prior to Tijuana, he played for Pumas. So he has been very actively playing in the league. and he spoke with the media about joining Atlanta and what his reasoning was, what interested him in joining the Five Stripes. So here is Torres on that.
Atlanta porque primero que nada intentamos el regresar a la MLS, porque me había sentido muy cómodo en Chivas USA, en Houston Dynamo. Creo que fueron los mejores momentos de mi carrera acá en Estados Unidos. Y en México se me cerraron algunas puertas, se me cerraron algunas oportunidades, como fue cuando vine a Chivas USA, que en Chivas de Guadalajara se me cerraron los minutos, se me cerraron oportunidades. Y bueno, surgió la posibilidad de buscar alguna opción por acá, por Estados Unidos. Carlos Bocanegra se pone en contacto conmigo por diferentes circunstancias, incluyendo la lesión de Joseph Martínez, y surgió esta posibilidad importante de venir para acá. Gracias a Dios se consiguió el poder venir acá. Había algunos clubes en la MLS también que estaban interesados, pero al final yo sabía que por el estilo de juego, por la gran institución que es Atlanta y por el gran equipo que es, sabía que Atlanta era la mejor opción para mí.
Well, I chose Atlanta because I think it was the best option for me. And I wanted to get back to MLS because I think it's a league where I had some of the best moments of my career. When I was in Mexico with clubs like Chivas and others, I didn't have as many opportunities and maybe had some doors closed for me. So I had other MLS teams who were interested at the time, and I was thinking about a move back to MLS because, as I said, it's a league where I'd had success in the past. And then Carlos Bocanegra was in contact with me, and due to a variety of circumstances, one being the injury to Joseph, the opportunity became available, and I chose Atlanta because it's a great club. And I think I have a good opportunity here.
And that is Torres discussing joining Atlanta United and his reasoning behind it. He's previously played in MLS as well in his career. He played with Chivas USA and Houston. So here is Torres discussing playing in Major League Soccer and not only his experience in the league, but how it will help him transition to the new team in Atlanta. So here are his thoughts on that.
La verdad, yo lo he pensado bastante, he analizado esa pregunta, ¿por qué acá en la MLS pude entregar o dar los mejores resultados o pude dar lo mejor de mí en cuanto a lo futbolístico? Y yo creo que pasa por la cuestión de la confianza y el ritmo de juego, en que tuve los minutos de juego que cualquier jugador, no solamente yo, necesita para poder agarrar ritmo de juego dentro de la cancha, el tener esa confianza para poder hacer goles, tener esa continuidad en cuanto a tener 6, 7 partidos seguidos. Agarras como jugador, no solamente yo, agarras un ritmo de juego en cuanto a tiempos, espacios, comunicación con tus compañeros, que hace que puedas entregar tu mejor resultado, ¿no? Cosa que a lo mejor por diferentes circunstancias, no me voy a meter en pretextos o excusas. En México no se me pudo dar, ni en Cruz Azul, ni en Pumas. A lo mejor en Pumas un poquito más y pude hacer algunos goles ahí, pero nunca tuve esa continuidad que a lo mejor acá, tanto en Chivas USA como en el Houston Dynamo, la tuve y terminé agarrando ese ritmo de juego y esa estabilidad como jugador que cualquier jugador necesita, ¿no? Y Xolos, yo creo que me sentí muy bien. El tiempo que me tocó jugar, creo que me voy contento de Xolos porque hice goles, a pesar de que era muy poquito lo que se me contemplaba. Creo que lo hice bien, pero es complicado cuando a lo mejor te meten un partido y luego 3 partidos te meten 5 minutos, tratas de hacerlo mejor, pero no no llegas a alcanzar ese nivel futbolístico que cualquier jugador necesita, cosa que acá en Estados Unidos tuve y pude dar lo mejor de mí y pude entregar los resultados que se me pedían, ¿no? Ahora espero acá en Atlanta tener esos minutos de juego, tener esa continuidad, agarrar ese ritmo de juego para poder hacer las cosas bien y hacer goles y hacer lo que más quiero, más me gusta y poder entregar resultados positivos, ¿no?
Para complementar, sorry, Justin, just a quick
This
follow-up.
that I've thought about a lot is why I was able to have success in the MLS compared to Mexico, and I think it's due to the fact that as a player you get confidence and a rhythm when you're playing consistently. So in MLS, I was able to have that opportunity, and it gave me confidence. And when you're not just me, but when any player is getting minutes regularly, they're in better form. They're finding spaces on the field and better communicating with their teammates. So I think it's a matter of confidence and rhythm. And in Mexico, I didn't have as many opportunities. I tried to do the best I could when I was at Tijuana and was able to score some goals, but it's very difficult when you might play one game and then in other games you're only playing a few minutes off the bench. So it's difficult to find that same rhythm. Like I said, not just for me, but for any player. So that's what I'm looking for here in Atlanta is that opportunity and just the chance to do what I love and what I do best, which is to play and score goals to try to help the team.
And then finally, we also discussed the opportunity of him playing in a starting forward spot. Obviously, with the injury to Joseph Martinez, and he's now on the injured list, the IL. He's not going to play anymore this season. That gives him an opportunity to play in a starting spot alongside, and there's competition there. You have J.J. Williams and Adam John also at forward, but Torres discussed the opportunity of playing as a starter for Atlanta as a forward.
Las dos formaciones, no tengo problema con jugar con un delantero o con dos delanteros. Si me preguntas qué prefiero, por ahí me siento un poquito más cómodo con dos delanteros, pero estoy obviamente, me adapto perfectamente al sistema que vaya a poner el entrenador o con el que vayamos a jugar contra Nashville en 10 días. Entonces, no tengo problema, pero por ahí me inclinaría un poquito más con dos delanteros.
I've played both formations, and I don't have a problem either way, whether it's playing with one forward or with two. If you ask me, I would say I'm maybe slightly more comfortable playing with two, but I'm a player who can easily adapt to, whatever the coaching staff is asking, whatever formation that may be, and how they want us to play in our game against Nashville in 10 days.
And that was Torres discussing the opportunity to play in the forward spot. On our next show, we'll have audio from Brad Guzan and Jeff Larentowicz discussing their restart to the regular season and previewing their contest against Nashville. And I'll end on what I'm watching. Netflix has been very strong. I've been watching a lot of The Indian Matchmaker. That's been intriguing seeing, and I was watching it literally while doing the notes for today's show, kind of back and forth. So I've been watching that quite a bit. I support Kadeem Harrison from A Different World and from White Man Can't Jump. That's the homie. So I've been watching the Teenage Bounty Hunters, and it's based in Atlanta. So they do talk about certain parts of the city. I'm a few episodes into that. It's definitely a teenage show meant for teenage girls and all that stuff. Kadeem has a few scenes in every episode, which I enjoy. He's doing a good job so far, but it is very teen oriented, and I'm not a teenage girl, so I'm working through it and finding my way through that show. I've liked Inside the World's Toughest Prisons. I enjoy the prison shows. I don't know what that says about me, but he went to Africa. It was he went to Germany, went to African prisons, and I think he went to one in South America. And I've always said that if you think, and the American prison system has a lot of issues, we all know this, but you look at what's going on here in the United States and you compare it to other countries, it really opens your eyes up to how prisoners are treated in other countries. as compared to the United States. Now, the thing about the show, and that always gets me, they always say this is a good prison, this is a bad prison, or these guys have these, they can do this, and they have these certain freedoms. But in the end, you're still in prison. It's like, so you may be able to get a certain meal or be able to be outside a little bit more and do this physical activity, but you're still in prison. And that has to wait. And I think the show opens up people's eyes to a lot of what these men and women have to go through for committing their crimes. Now, and they're committed crimes, and there's punishment for that. But when you watch the show, you see the discrepancies in their treatment in relation to what they did, or a crime they commit and the amount of punishment that they get. And you wonder, is it the judicial system? Do they have a bad lawyer? What were the reasonings for all of that? So I think that shows a very good eye-opener for a lot of people to what's going on in the world. And that's really what I've been watching. The sports, I said, they've been very active. And I've been catching up on a lot of them. A lot of basketball, a lot of hockey. Not even a lot of, I even talking NASCAR. I haven't watched too much NASCAR. There's a lot of sports going on. There's professional wrestling. And we're going to do our show, Lord willing, this week. We've been promising it for weeks, I know. As far as verbal submission, where we discuss mixed martial arts and professional wrestling, there's a lot going on there. And that's where I think, and then we'll end on this point and conclude today's show. We went about a month, I would say, without really no live sports of substance. I know there were random things here and there. And with that month, teams were and leagues were preparing and trying to figure things out. August has been so active with sports activities. We've had all the European leagues wrap up their soccer, and then we have the Champions League going on. And we'll touch on Champions League, I think, when we do our preview of Atlanta United. We'll discuss the global soccer, but they are back playing. Golf has been happening. We had a PGA Championship last week. Mixed martial arts at UFC, they had an event with Stipe Miocic retaining his heavyweight championship over Daniel Cormier this past weekend. So we have that going on. As I mentioned, all of the hockey and the basketball. So we delved into that. I mentioned the golf. All of that going on. The auto racing. It's just a lot going on. Professional baseball. I didn't even do a beanball section. All the baseball is going on. So I could have done about 30 minutes on the baseball season so far. So I think what we're starting to have is almost too much sports in the month of August. August is usually a time where NBA's done, NHL's done, and on our side of things, we're ramping up for college football, and we're doing MLS, and that's cool. It's a nice balance, a nice flow. And baseball's going. That's a nice flow. Everything's going on. But now we have all these sports going on. It's almost too much to keep up with. But it's better that than the alternative. And the alternative, we went through a good portion of the summer. We don't want that again. So let's be happy with what we have. That concludes today's show. Thanks for listening to our broadcast. As always, head to sportsinquirer.net to follow everything that we're doing as far as the site goes. Go to our Twitter and Instagram pages on the Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. You can also go to Facebook under the Sports Inquirer or Sports Inquirer. Either one works for me. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes. Either one of those, you can follow everything that we're doing, and we'll keep it moving and grooving as always. Until next time, good fight, good night, and be safe.